This is certainly a topic near and dear to my heart because policies have consequences, and when you look on paper, there's nothing more similar as far as two major states in America than the two biggest states, California and Texas, where about 20% of Americans live. Both states have very diverse populations. Both states have a lot of natural resources. Both states have a coast with ports, borders with Mexico. So there's a lot of similarities, certainly more similarities on paper than differences. But as people who are conservatively minded, it is, I think, very important for us to fully comprehend the differences between these two almost nation states. Certainly Texas was a nation state. California really was only for about 4 weeks and never had a actual functioning government, being then taken over by basically a military government until it became a state a few years later, and ironically probably was best run while it was a military government, certainly compared to today. So you have these vast differences in policy, and what you have to ask yourself is then what are the results and who benefits most from the results? And one of the things that the left, I think, delights in trying to get us on the defensive, those of us who aren't liberal, is that they claim that our policies only help the rich, right? They don't help the poor. You hear that all the time. Well, let's look at the poverty rates in the two biggest states. You'd think that might say something about the current condition of the two biggest states. Well, what probably none of you know, because I certainly didn't know this until I did research for the Texas model book, is that the U.S. Census Bureau, up until a couple of months ago, measured poverty the same way throughout the whole country, regardless of cost of living. And so what they did was they said, okay, how many ever people are in your family, we'll take the cost of food and we'll times that by 3, and that's the poverty rate, poverty level. Below that level of threshold, you're in poverty. Above it, you're not. But it doesn't matter whether you're in Manhattan or in Bozeman, Montana. Now, do you think there's price differences between Manhattan and Bozeman, Montana? Yes. But the U.S. Census Bureau did not account for any of those price differences, and they went decades with Congress complaining from time to time, saying, hey, you know, is this really realistic? Well, a week after the election, something came out called the Research Supplemental Poverty Measure. And this was a publication from Census that built upon several years of research that answered this criticism from Congress. And they looked at things like regional cost of living variations. They looked at the cost to commute or to get to work, the cost of medical care. They even included government assistance. So they even added in welfare. And lo and behold, the state with the highest poverty rate in the nation, even higher than Washington, D.C., was California. 23.5% of the population in poverty in California. Almost 1 in 4. Stunning. Absolutely stunning from a public policy perspective. This poverty rate for California was about 9% higher than the previous measures of poverty under the traditional way of looking at things. Texas's poverty rate dropped a couple of points. And if you compare the two biggest states that are very similar demographically, and demographics really matters when it comes to poverty because there are persistent trends among racial and ethnic groups that tend to have higher poverty rates than other racial or ethnic groups in this country. And so if you compare the two states, as a proportion of the population, there are 42% more poor people in California than in Texas. As a proportion of the population, 23.5 versus 16.5. And 23.5 is almost half again larger than 16.5, meaning there's about, like I said, 42% more poor people as a proportion of the population. That's significant.